Welcome to Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery, a conversation held at the intersection of substance abuse, mental health, and everyday living. Your hosts, Marc Regala and Justin Wolf, bring both professional expertise and personal understanding to the table. So welcome to the conversation. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Healing Minds, Stories of Recovery and Resiliency. I'm your host, Justin Wolf, joined as always by my co-host, Marc Regala, who is a part-time weather expert for all those who join and listen to the show. And we're joined by our guest back for a second round, because the first was not enough, Maggie Burke.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you back. So Maggie, this is where we all kind of take a step back and let Marc share with us what it's looking like outside. So Marc, what are we seeing?
Put me on the spot, man. September 30th.
Ready.
What time of the year? September 30th. Got a little Indian summer going on. Halloween's around the corner. And what's even crazier is we're starting to talk about this upcoming holiday season as you start looking at the calendar beyond October. So I don't know where the year went, Justin, but it definitely flew by.
Yeah, I know. In no time, we will see you in your red and white stockings, Marc. So until that day, we will wait with bated breath.
No more medium T-shirts, hoodie sweatshirts pretty soon.
Oh, it's bulking season?
Mm-hmm.
Look at you. Marc's got a bulk to cut, so...
It will be bulking season, exactly.
Marc is going to make himself once again known with the carbohydrate community. So... All right, so it's all right, Marc. Just embrace it.
I do.
So, what we have Maggie back here, and I think this is a really important topic, and we we're kind of discussing this, and she was sharing her thoughts and her wisdom about, really kind of looking at this dual perspective on what it's like when somebody is in their active addiction, while also managing their unchecked mental health symptoms, which can lead to a very chaotic experience for that individual and their loved ones who are kind of watching, observing, and present for what is happening in the home and the way in which they see that individual living their life. And I think there's this fantastic title, and I know Maggie shared it with me, where it's really, you can't order chaos. And I think that's kind of the theme of what it is that we're going to kind of be diving in and talking to, because when we're talking about this, I know as a loved one, this can be incredibly painful and hard and difficult to watch somebody that you care about, that you have very fond memories and associations with, really watching them struggle and not showing up as their best version of themselves and falling into some destructive patterns that kind of cause so much pain and suffering for the individual as well as for those who are really kind of, trying to support that person during that time. And so these cycles, these waves can really be difficult to endure as a loved one. And it also, from what I've heard from a lot of people, it's kind of like, hey, things are going really good now, and I'm just waiting for that next shoe to drop. And so, Maggie, as always, like your wisdom and your personal experience, I think is really impactful and powerful and really kind of highlights exactly what this looks like. And so for yourself and for your family, it's kind of like what you guys were going through and went through. Could you talk a little bit about kind of like what that cycle was like from your side?
Exactly. And I love that. I heard this phrase and I thought it was just such a perfect fit for this journey, and I stole it completely. But I think it really epitomizes what the person struggling is going through and what the family is going through. And I don't know if everyone knows my backstory, but our son Cormac died after a 9-year battle with mental health challenges and substance use challenges. And so we went through quite a journey with Justin actually by our sides. It was very tumultuous. It was as described, very unpredictable. I think, before I go into kind of the spinning of your wheels phase of this, I think it's super important. I really feel blessed to sit on a panel with you two, because I think you epitomize the hope that people have to have, and that you walk the walk and talk the talk, and that you guys have, through your own journeys, walk through storms and come out of it on the other side to lead purposeful lives. And I always, even though I have experienced great loss, my messaging is always around hope and help and the worthiness that everyone deserves in their recovery process. So I kind of, I want to say that first and foremost. So always love hanging with you guys, because your perspective is phenomenal. As is your, just example to people, in your advocacy in the community. Talking about spinning your wheels, boy, that is exactly that. I mean, I think we saw a ton of characteristics. We saw the cycling through. We saw the fake it till you make it, the self-sabotage. I think I really learned too, through my own work with my therapist and stuff, that even when you get to the point of you're in a good place, a lot of times that person is sitting in fear of that other shoe to drop. Like a good place is not necessarily comfortable for me, I was like, what? I found that so astounding that, oh my God, like celebrate that good place. But that fear and that messaging looms in the background, and kind of waiting. And then the self-sabotage, well, you know what? I'm going to jack this up well before, anything else happens, because that's what I do, or that's what what I am, or, I guess, I think sometimes, change is hard. Change is hard on a good day for anybody. And I think sometimes people aren't committed to change, or like Cormac, sometimes he wanted to cafeteria pick his recovery, and he wanted to do this, but not this. And if you're not all in, with your mental health, having that in check, with the substance use, it's just, not going to work. And I'm a firm believer that people cling to behavior that they perceive is somehow beneficial for them at that time, looking at that active addictive mind. There's something with repetitive behavior that is keeping them, in that cycle. And I think it's, and a lot of that, I talk to people, while it's not personally intended to be malicious or hurtful, your family, it becomes very disruptive, very chaotic, to weather that storm with someone. And, I think too, with once you can't start to order your house until you kind of settle in to some place of grounding yourself, seeking treatment, detoxing, going through stages with therapy, because if not, it's like a house of cards.
Yeah. And I think you said something like there a moment ago that I just really kind of jumped out to me, about it being personal, right? And a lot of the behavior, when you're kind of seeing your loved one kind of going through and cycling through, and you're going and you're seeing these waves, that their actions, their behaviors is people that are kind of watching and kind of loving and supporting this person. You can take those behaviors and those actions very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And we can become really emotionally reactive, and it can seem like their behavior, like you're saying, it appears to be on the surface out of control. But for somebody, right, in their active use, and especially, hey, when the mind's not right and the brain's been hijacked by that addiction, and the disease is talking and it's getting really loud and it's making you feel as if hey, this is a matter of survival. I need to get this or else I could die. Their behavior becomes very well understood. And it makes perfect sense when you kind of look at it from that perspective of, hey, this is at the top of the food chain, and I got to make sure that's getting fed. Because if I don't, then I'm not going to kind of be here, right? And so that, as a loved one, kind of watching this happen becomes very difficult, very taxing, and exhausting. And like you said, kind of doing your own work. That, I mean, you see this kind of tear families apart. And really take the light off of other people in the household and kind of make it shine on the individual who's really struggling. And I think that becomes a huge challenge because then it's like, hey, this person's more than those behaviors that they're displaying than what they're like, personifying and living in those moments. And yet it can feel like for that person and for that, like this is who I am and this is defining me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you do. The families become collateral damage, good, bad, or otherwise. I mean, that is a fact. What you do with that is a different story. But I think too, to separate that the person who is in that active addictive state, they are numb, or they are numbing. You are watching it with full sober eyes, so there's two very different perspectives, because you are not numb to the fact of what they're going through. And if they're using through it, again, like you talk about that hijacking and that messaging in the brain that continues, to be very prevalent and to be their go-to until they get to, a different place. And I think, Brene Brown said it great: when you numb the pain, you numb the positive.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows for nothing to get in there, because it's I think too, and, I learned so much in this journey, it is so powerful. Like, I remember Kevin and I talking, and he's like, all this support, all this love, all these resources. I'm like, this is so much bigger than we can even imagine in Cormac's life, in his brain, in his being. We could still always see Cormac in there. We never got to a place, as you well know, that it was, we could separate the behaviors, but we knew our kid was there, and he fought to continue to show himself, even, in the good and the bad of those situations. We never lost his spirit or him in that process. But as I say, it's a very unpredictable, journey, so to speak.
Mark, I'm kind of wondering what you're thinking over there. I see that head nodding, which means I know.
I'm looking at it, Maggie's talking about it from a parental perspective or from a family perspective, dealing with somebody who's an addict in the family with the mental health diagnosis. I'm looking at it from the addict's perspective, with the mental health diagnosis, because looking back at it, and you got me very reflective right now. I know I caused a lot of trauma and a lot of destruction for my wife, who eventually left me, for my children, who, again, I really haven't talked to them in 7 years. And then when my divorce was going on, a lot of chaos in my mom and dad's house, because I moved to my parents, when my divorce was going on and so forth. And that's really when the addiction took a whole nother level, when the divorce was pending. But the thing about it is, when you're in it, you don't realize you're causing that destruction. You don't realize that you're causing that trauma to the individual. All you're trying to do is friggin' survive, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like with me, like with the opiates, I had, legal bills that were pending. I had responsibilities at work. Early on in my addictions, obviously I was father, active in my kids' lives, kids' activities, basically, and you're just so friggin' sick, waking up every single day. And you still got to get through the day. You still got to be productive at work. You still got to provide for your family. You still got to be there for your kids. So all your mind is friggin' thinking about is just give me the pills or give me the drugs to just get me through the day, so I'm not sick and I actually feel normal. You get your fix, if you will. But that's how the brain is hijacked. I guess I'm kind of giving you a vision of how your brain is hijacked. I look back at it now when I'm working with people that are dealing with addictions, and I see, I guess, what my wife saw and my kids saw and my parents saw. And, it makes me feel bad. I'm not going to lie. It makes me feel real bad, but I just didn't know it at that particular time. All I could do was apologize and just focus on trying to be better and, try to make them proud now. But man, it's, I get it now, but you don't get it when you're in active addiction and you're trying to get control of your mental health at the same time.
Right. Because that's the thing. It's like, hey, like the mental health piece is just kind of getting so attacked by the use, and like just like this, like the mood, right? The fluctuation, the ups, the downs, like this emotional roller coaster that you can feel like you're on. this is the piece when you look at, suicidality or like just suicidal ideation, kind of like when you're up or when you're coming down, like, and the follow through or the attempts, like they drastically go up when substances are in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And looking at what's driving the bus, like with Cormac at times, there was significant trauma, there was use, and you just don't know. I mean, it's a three-headed beast, and it's the drugs, and if it's not the drugs, it's the thought process that's going to lead you to it. And I always told him too, I think at times, just as you well know, like he was afraid to admit to himself that he was triggering. And because I think he felt, where is this going to go? But I kept saying there's always off ramps. Like you get to the point of you think or you crave, okay, then you make a call, then you get it, then it is a multi-step process in a lot of ways. And there are off ramps. I said, you have people in your community. I said, you have exit ramps. You just have, it's okay to, to recognize that trigger, because what happens is he didn't. And then we're down a flipping rabbit hole. Like he'd be good, not using. And then boom, it was like a tsunami that he just kept pushing down, because I think of the fear of where is this going to lead me? But if he addressed each one kind of when they came up and, leaned back into his recovery community or his therapies or this, we could slowly see it. Like he'd stop this, he'd stop going to therapy, he'd stop this. And he said, if I could just work 24 hours, I'd be fine. I go, no, that's not going to work for you, buddy. That is just another level of escapism. But, I think too, it was looking, when we first went to his first treatment center, and you kind of naively think, okay, we're good. And we do everything. And okay. And it's not just a light switch that is going to flip. It is rewiring your whole house, and even at that young age, he had 8 years, and you think, okay, well, that's not so long. Can he turn it around? But again, it is really rewiring, building from the foundation up. And, you can't build a house on quicksand, and you can't build a house, that doesn't have a solid foundation. And I think, it just became sometimes just a house of cards, that he would get to a point of okay. And then I think the fear of what does success bring for me? Am I just going to wait for, and that lurked in the background of what's around the corner that I'm going to mess up, and I think that became a real struggle for him.
Absolutely. And I think like you talk about fear, and it's also that shame component that kind of gets tied into it, because those two just walk hand in hand, especially in the recovery, when it's kind of looking at this. And you mentioned earlier where it's like, hey, the family kind of rallying around and like the circle of like troops and support that are there. And I know for a lot of people that like I've spoken to, like even just like for myself, like the thought of like, I don't deserve this, right?
Yeah.
This makes me feel even worse because they're still here in my corner after everything I've done. God, I can't believe I'm putting them through this.
Yeah.
I think his thought process there, though, is very similar to like my thought process in the sense that, I was in treatment multiple times, and, you get to the point where you're on point with everything that you need to do, and you just want to get back to living your life.
Yeah.
And the issue is that, when you just get back to living your life or going back to what you would consider normal, that's when complacency sets in, and you stop seeing your therapist, or you stop doing the little things that maintains your sobriety and your recovery. And then you have a bad day at work, or an argument with a friend, or, a bad thought from something that happened in the past. And then all of a sudden you are triggered, and then you go back to that repetitive behavior that was so destructive in the past. And that happened to me a number of times. I'm not a one and done type of guy. It took me, there was a number of relapses before I got to the point that I'm at right now. And, where I'm at right now, it's just, I come to the conclusion that literally I have to put my sobriety and my recovery first every single day. And there are things that I need to do every single day for the rest of my life to keep everything in check. And that needs to be first and foremost. But it took me a long time to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like they
Or
tell you,
take.
hey, prioritize yourself, right? Make
Mm-hmm.
yourself a priority in your own
Yeah.
recovery, because anything you put before it, you'll lose, right? And I think for like that piece of like that shame piece that kind of ties with it, and or like just feeling like, hey, I'm checking these boxes, I should be fine, right? I just want to get back. I don't want to like feel so different than everybody else. Like I'm just going to go back doing exactly what I was doing beforehand. The only difference is now I'm sober, I'm not using, and maybe my mental health is in a little bit of a better place now. But do I really have to commit to doing all these things, right?
Right.
And
And
I
I
think
think
that's
it's
why I get a lot of people even coming in nowadays too, who will be like, I just got out of treatment. I did my 30 days in and out. I'm good. And do I really need therapy anymore? I think I did everything I needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a
Sorry,
firm
Maggie.
believer. I mean, you have to tend to your, I don't care what you struggle with. Everyone struggles with something. You have to tend to your emotional garden every day, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that shame component, while when you're looking from a family perspective and all this chaos, and you are just trying to keep a lid on holding your family together while this kid keeps jumping in the deep end, for lack of a better word. And it was very hard needle to thread. Um, to message back to him, yeah, I'm pissed. This is chaotic. This is disruptive. This isn't just about you. But also, make sure that that message of empathy came through. I'm not agreeing with what you're doing. I still love you. We will still support you. And I always say support looks different at different times. It can be from a distance. It can be, um, there were times I could only text Cormac because I was so um, just fearful, angry. And I always say anger is a secondary emotion. This was complete and utter raw fear, thinking I'm going to lose him. He is going to die in this process. So I think, in trying not, I think sometimes when that message comes across, the individual struggling goes into that victim mode. And you really have to have a lot of tools as a loved one to sit across from that, because it becomes a lot of projection. It becomes like they're going to off turf that to you, being like um, it's my problem. And I said to him, we're a family. We'll always be a family. So it's everyone. Everyone goes down that rabbit hole when you're struggling and you hurt. We can't control it. We can't change it. We can't make that better for you, but we go down it out of love. And that's okay. But it is, because I said there's a lot of tools that addictive mind, uses when they're standing in front of someone who's trying to confront them on their behavior. And it's a tough place to be, because you want to give the message of love. And we always ended with that, and I knew he was loved. But again, it's all those other feelings that creep in that kind of cloud that perspective for him.
Yeah. I appreciate what you're saying there. I mean, I'm just thinking back and I'm skipping some memories over here. I remember one time, I guess it was an intervention. Okay, and I'm not a fan of intervention. I just am not. I guess it depends on how you're coming towards the person. And I mean, I just felt so ganged up on, and I know that my family at this particular time was just so fed up with my behavior. But I mean, they were coming at me pretty hard, and it wasn't just like my immediate family. There were some distant relatives there as well. And I just remember my feelings at that particular time, because I didn't think it was coming from a place of love. And I knew I was sick, and I felt bad that I was doing this to them, but I didn't know any way out of it. And at that point, I can honestly tell you, I mean, I was having some very serious suicidal thoughts at that particular time, because I didn't want to give my family this pain anymore. But at the same time, I did not know how to get out of my addictions, and
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to live at that point, if that makes sense. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
No, I can totally relate to that. And I mean, I remember times when with Cormac, and but I I'm a firm believer that as a family member, you can't let fear drive. You have to establish those safe, clear boundaries.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you know, I wouldn't tolerate this from your dad, from my brothers, from a friend. Like, you have to understand, I cannot tolerate this. It's, you know, it becomes an abusive relationship, so to speak. And I tell families they have to stand that firm ground. Boundaries, they're horrific to uphold. Um, but you have to carve out some safe place, and they're made out of love. And I said, that's what I said. I mean, the tough love when we had to put Cormac out of the house was the last gift we had to give him. We had put everything else in front of him, but we had to put 4 of us in a lifeboat and throw him a life preserver with
Yeah.
resources and steer him back to his recovery community. And, you know, with love, but, you know, some people are so scared that that person is going to harm themselves, or they're going to do that regardless of really what comes out of your mouth. And
Yeah.
you need to realize that, you know, again, your messaging, and you have to work on that. I always, in my work, you know, it was therapy for everyone. I firmly believe I can't ask Cormac to go to therapy if I'm not going to do my work. And, I would run scenarios with my therapist of worst case scenarios so that I could work on not emotionally responding in that situation, and being calm and using tools to get the messaging while keeping us safe and holding firm boundaries, but also showing Cormac that there's another way to do this, and that, or this won't be tolerated, or that, you know, and it's tough, you know, you have to, but going there in my brain helped me walk that back and emotionally and mentally prepare for, worst case scenarios. I mean, I let myself go there. I don't know if people do, but I woke up with that every morning, that I could lose Cormac. I knew that fear was very real. And I had to figure out how to manage my day through that, how not to let his addiction hijack me or my family, because it will take everything in its path. I tell people,
Oh,
unchecked,
yeah.
it will take everything. It will take your loved one, and it will take all of you with it if you let it. You know, I said it's at times just a very, very difficult, tough needle to thread, and to walk beside someone in that. But you walk because you know they're worth. And I said, you're worth it. You're worth your, you know. And I talk to people about reconciliation. All your family members want you is upright and healthy. All that other stuff is going to go in the rearview mirror. They want you in a good place. They want you finding peace, finding purpose. All that stuff is secondary. Yes, they can be pissed and hold stuff again, but in the big picture, that's all they want. And everything that's coming over at you is really out of fear of losing you.
I want to say something really quick here, if that's okay. You hit on a couple of important comments, and I want to drive this for the audience. So it is a family disease. There's no doubt about it. That's why they call addiction a family disease. I mean, everybody in the household's affected, so you're 100% spot on there. But just like we talk about the individual going through it being proactive, you obviously and your family was very proactive as well with the therapy and getting
Mm-hmm.
educated and running those scenarios. And what I find working with individuals, trying to help them, give them some guidance, and then also talking to family members as well, is they just think it's their problem. They
Yeah.
need they need to figure it out on themselves. And I tell family members all the time, you need to be educated too, and you need to understand what's going on. It's best you're not going through it, so you're never going to understand exactly what they're going through. But you know, there's an opportunity there for you to be educated as well, and get some guidance as well. Because as you said, if you don't, it's gonna affect everybody in the household.
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge thing, because it's communicating to the person. Like, if you're just telling them to go get therapy, it's a you issue. You need to fix you. Well, they came from this dynamic. This dynamic was feeding, contributing, and kind of helping this kind of flourish to where it came to. And so it's not just on one person, like you're both saying. Absolutely. It is the whole family system has to shift in order to support, to make changes, because there's things that we're inadvertently doing that are kind of feeding it. And there's things that we know that maybe isn't working or effective, but yet we keep going back to it because it's what's comfortable for us. They just need to do it. And if we just take a step back and look and say, hey, what they're doing still and what they're showing us is communicating to me that what I'm doing is not effective, well, then I better sure as hell figure out a different way to really try and emphasize or try and, empower them to do something different, because what I'm doing is not working. And I think that's where that humility piece kicks in, where it could be hard as a family member or a loved one to be like, just Maggie, I think you kind of said it, where it's huge, kind of doing your own work and acknowledging, I need to work through this. I need to get some other ideas or maybe a different perspective. So if this situation does come up, what am I doing to be ready to respond in an effective manner?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I can't ask someone to do the work if I'm not going to do work right along with them. That's just not going to work, and I think, through our journey, when we're talking about a 14, 15, 16, you really have to hold the line, right? Because, but later on, at a treatment center, the vulnerability component came in, and about us being able to show vulnerability in a safe space to Cormac, which was very important. And I think it was the time and place. We had kind of gotten through. I mean, we were holding a line, but it was time for him to see, our family dynamics, our traumas, our whatever, in that you're not alone, that everybody struggles with things. Where I think as a parent, you just want to sit and hold this, this stoic front of, and it can't be my way or the highway. That does not work. It has to be a collaboration. And I'm a firm believer that your child or your loved one needs to be seen and heard. You may not agree with what they're doing, but you need to validate the pain of what they are experiencing and where that is coming from. You may not be able to, as Marc said, to totally understand it, but you need to validate it. And I also think a huge challenge for us was you want them at D already. They're at A. The mindfulness and to sit, where are they at, and to figure out a way to meet them where they're at. You do want them at D, but they can't get there yet. You know what I mean? And it's frustrating because you know that they can, that they have it in them. But if you are already at D and can't meet them back at A, it's just not going to work. It's going to be a clash. And I think it's very important to find that validation, that they always need to have a voice. Everyone needs to have a voice, and everyone needs to be validated. I don't care what you have done, what you're doing. You have to, you have to be understood and heard. And I think part of the understanding is learning, again, about this disease and its facets, and that it's just not, oh, why can't they just stop? And why can't they just this? And it is certainly not that easy at all, as we've all come to find out.
Yeah. That's what I dealt with. I the people around me said exactly what you just said. Why can't just stop using, not understanding the hijacking of the brain and the rewiring of the brain, because again, there was no education there, and they weren't taking the time to educate themselves. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way about them. I really am not. They just didn't know. And then I'm thinking back right now. One thing that was a very, very critical part in me recovering was I was in intensive care after my last overdose. And my mom had signed a piece of paper basically making me go to psychiatric care from the intensive care unit. And I was not happy about that. I was already in there another time. I didn't want to go down there. Psychiatrist was coming to the room. Quite frankly, there were security guards in the room. I was being a little bit of a hostile patient. And I really don't know if the psychiatrist coached my mom or not. And I remember having a conversation with my mom the day before they were sending me down to the psychiatric unit. And this was the first time that a relative ever used this terminology. And I remember this phone call distinctly. My mom said something to the effect of, Mark, we know that you're sick. We just want you to get better. But you're going to have to work through it to get better. And that was the first time any relative of mine used the word sick or sickness. And for some reason, when she said that, there was a calming effect on my body, on my brain, and I stopped being a hostile patient, and I went down there. You know,
Well, because
but
it
it
was
was
a sign like they
just that,
get it, like they're
yeah,
getting it.
just that little word, using the
Hmm.
word sick. It was just it just resonated with me.
Yeah, and I
Absolutely, because
think
then you're not feeling like you're being attacked again. I mean,
right,
it's just so like it's almost like bracing for like another interaction with the family. Here's coming the attack. My defenses are already up, and
right.
then using language that kind of just like speaks to you. We're kind of like, okay,
But
you're getting it.
it was just so simple to say, but I never heard that before in all my conversations with relatives.
Right. And so much around family messaging. I mean, you live and learn and you have to hone these tools as Justin said. Like it is, there's so much family of origin and family of dynamic and how and it may be perceived, you may mean it this way and look how it's perceived and look how put yourself on the end of what you're saying and changing that verbiage
Yep.
is so important. And also too, not to, because I do feel inactive addiction, unchecked active addiction is very self-absorbed,
Mhm.
right, at times. And you have to stay away from feeding the victim here as well, because that's going to stop the conversation, it's going to stop progress, it's going to stop everything. So how can you best be there for your loved one? And again, not easy, and that's why you have to do your own work. Like, we could stand in front of Cormac and do this, and then I'd have to go and just dump in front of a therapist, because I mean, all this where it is not easy to stand in the presence of all this. But that's why I say it's very important. Your best help and support to your loved one by getting in some sort of process, support group, therapy, all the above. I'm a huge proponent, because you just can't stand on the sidelines here and think, A, you know it all, and B, it's going to work, you know.
Right. I think you're kind of like highlighting as you're talking. I'm kind of thinking like we come about back to messaging and the way in which we're communicating and the words that are being used. It's like that intention versus the impact, right? The
Mhm.
intention, a lot of times you hear from people, is like very well intended. It is, I care about you, I love you, I don't want you to hurt, and I don't want you to suffer any longer. And the way that individual is experiencing that message, the way it's delivered at times, that impact is not experienced in that same manner. It's experienced because the words, the language that is being used, and the tone in which it is being delivered at times is very much of that of an attack, a critique, a criticism, that just really kind of resonates at the core, where it's like, okay, like you're against me, you're not with me on this.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think that's where like that powerful piece of just really taking a moment to kind of regulate ourselves, right? Because like if we're dysregulated, how the heck can we expect to regulate that person if they're dysregulated? Like that doesn't
E-
make sense. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. And understanding this disease is so cloaked in shame and cyclical shame that even at the best intention in your messaging coming across, that person, part of that they're going to hear it. Their mind is going to transcribe it to something that is shameful to them. So you really almost have to, you know what I mean? You have to just be so careful and keep things simple, keep, reiterating, the simple messaging. And that kind of goes back to, you can't order chaos, when you're trying to talk to someone, because they're immediately have gone here and you can't, you just have to, you can't go back to, this is not the time to go back to 2 weeks ago when dinner blew up, or this is not, you just, what is at hand needs to be addressed. And then there's a time and the place for everything else, but you can't just think you're going to unleash now on everything that, and believe you me, it is not easy. But it is just, it's just not fitting, and it doesn't work. You could do it, but it doesn't work, and it completely disconnects you from what's going on. And I think connection, is so, I just say, in my messaging, connection, connection, connection. You have to find connection where they're at. You have to connect to outside resources. They need to connect to outside. I mean, when Cormac started to really struggle again, he was pulling back from every mode of connection he knew. And we saw it. I remember sitting in your office, Justin, we're losing him. He's disconnecting from this. He's disconnecting from that. He's disconnecting from that. And then came a huge, a huge relapse. So I think it's very, just keeping, again, you can't ask someone to work on their stuff every day. It is it's daily work. It's daily work to separate yourself and go on with your day, even though you're living that you don't know what your loved one is doing. And sometimes, I said, you got to hand that over. I mean, I handed it over to God. I mean, I prayed that serenity prayer every day of my life, and in the beginning, I probably thought, well, I don't know if do I need it? Yeah, it became my lifeline because I couldn't, I really had to. And I think that's part of kind of seeing it from your perspective of, I have to surrender too.
Absolutely. Well, I know this has been an incredible conversation so far, and I know this is, as always, Maggie, you kind of bring in such great insight and awareness about just what is so critical for the family, and in this experience of watching and kind of being around your loved one as they struggle. And I think that's the part of really just knowing, hey, how we have to prioritize ourselves in this process, as well as wanting our loved one to really prioritize their well-being. And I think that's a very big challenge, because it's like Marc was saying earlier, where he's like, I don't know how to be sober. Well, it's also like sometimes we don't know how to prioritize what it is that actually is going to be helpful. What is it that actually what is this picture of health? What does healthy look like? And I know that's a huge thing that Marc dove into. I know today he's wearing a little bit of a larger shirt, but usually he's got his medium on, and you would see just the transformational work that he put into himself. And I think, Marc, if you want to kind of speak a little bit on that, I think that could be a way to kind of bring all this that we're talking about today home.
It's a story that I've repeated a number of times here, but I don't know if I ever told the story about my mom in that conversation, but I go to psychiatric care, and I remember specifically it was the third day. On the third day, I was introduced to NAMI, and they had a speaker come in, and I was doing all my groups, so there's about 8 to 10 people in psychiatric care. I knew I was the only opiate addict that was in there. And this gentleman starts speaking, and it turns out that he's a heroin addict in recovery. And he got into his story, and he got into his addiction and how many times he was in the treatment. And quite frankly, his story made my story seem like my story was Disney World. And I walked up to him afterwards and told him a little bit about my story over like a minute or two, how bad I was struggling. And he told me, he goes, listen, man, he goes, you're gonna have to go to treatment. You're gonna have to go to IOP. He goes, I don't know how long you're gonna be in treatment for, but I'll never forget the look on this man's face. Just like I'll never forget that conversation with my mom. He said, you hear me, and you hear me loud and clear. He said that the real work doesn't start till you're discharged from all medical care. And it's on you that very first morning that you wake up to do all the things that you need to do every single day to keep your disease in check, because this is a disease. And I guess because he had street creds and he was the only one that I knew that was out of it, because everybody else that I knew that was in it was pretty much dead at this point or in jail. I would have ran through a friggin' brick wall if that guy told me to run through a brick wall, if that's what he told me to get out of it, because I wanted out of it so bad. And I took those words to heart. And that day that I overdosed and was in intensive care, and then went down to psychiatric, then went to treatment for the last time. That was the last day that I used drank or used drugs. But I mean, everything changed. Like literally, I made my recovery and my sobriety a priority. And yes, it's very exercise driven because of the endorphin effect. It's very diet driven, reframing of the mind, trying to focus on the positives, breathing exercises, connecting with my higher power. I mean, I was all in because I needed to be all in because my addictions were so aggressive. And, here we are, 5+ years into recovery, and my life has changed so much. And I would have never dreamed in a million years that it would have changed the way it was changed. But it really started, with that overdose and that conversation with my mom. And then meeting that day, the third day that I was down in psychiatric care. But that's the one thing that I did different coming out of treatment the last time that I didn't do previous times. I mean, I would have periods of time where I would be on my game and then I would get complacent.
Mm.
Where this time I said, there's no way I'm going to get complacent. I'm going to go at it every single day. And it worked. I mean, it was scary at first. I'm not going to lie, because you got to change so much of your daily routine. But like we talked about before, I mean, you want it to become a habit, you want it to become a lifestyle. Now it's just so secondhand. I don't think twice about it. And I like the way I'm living right now a lot better than the life I was living before. But there was a lot of change along the way. But all those changes were to make me better, not only mentally, but obviously physically as well, and spiritually. And I think all three of those, being strong physically, mentally, and spiritually, has created the ground or the foundation of where I'm at right now from a recovery perspective.
Well, thanks, Paul, as always, man. Maggie, anything else you'd like to kind of share with us?
I think just touching on what Marc said too, the tools, taking the tools and working them. It's one thing to be in treatment. Cormac was in multiple treatment settings, but he struggled with consistently enacting those in everyday life and living with them. And again, the disease process of a diabetic's, not going to go far without their insulin. I mean, that is kind of the mindset that we have to think that, or asthmatic without their inhalers. So these tools, again, every day need to be a priority. And he was young, and I think he thought he could, he could skirt through another. We had another thing was, that I speak about is he was like, well, Mom, relapse is a part of recovery. I mean, I said, listen, if you continue with that mindset, that is not going to help you. Because I said, you are nearly out of cat lives here, which he was. And, your recovery community is there. But if you continue to give yourself that safety net where, I can continue, because I've got this, or I can relapse because I've got this. As I say, his relapses were near lethal, and they just were getting worse and worse. So it was, it's a very important, message that, as I say, he could do time in treatment centers standing on his head. He had been through, and he was the model citizen in there. God love the kid, but he really needed to buy into it, hook, line, and sinker. And it's tough. And I think part of it was he was young, and he thought, I can take a day off, or I can take my foot off the pedal here. And you can't. You have to be, and yes, you can have tough days, you can have, better days, and just that connection. And that was the biggest thing that I talk to people about is, keeping connected, because connection is a form of accountability for everyone, and once you continue, if you step back from that and you just fade into the background, people can't help you, they can't reach you. And same thing for us with the family, with the, we let people know our kids in crisis. And that my messaging to family is, you can't just, your loved one is cycling in shame. So if you're going to sit with this in a corner in a shameful way, no. And I said, you cut yourself off from every good resource that you have. We're a family, we're struggling, our kids in crisis. Like it or not, this is us. And, if people couldn't handle it, off you go. I have no time for you, really. But we circled and I said, we're a family that's standing intact because we made ourselves vulnerable to this process and let people in. Let professionals in, let people in the support community in. That helped me. I remember someone picking up Cormac's bags, and he said, "Hold that line. I am alive today." He said, "Part of the reason is because my mom held that line, and where I was crumbling, but I knew I had to." So I think, just you want your loved one to seek a community of help. You and yourself, again, as we talked about, have to continue to immerse yourself in a community that's going to help you as well, because helping you helps you to be better, to help them as well.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
Thanks.
Now, as always, Maggie and Marc, love having you guys here and sharing your insights and just your personal experiences here that kind of brings such light to this, very heavy topic here when we're talking about, being impacted by the disease of addiction and active mental health that is unchecked. So I think you guys gave a ton of great insight and wisdom here. So very grateful that you're able to kind of join today. And we're very grateful that everybody's listening to these and tuning into our podcast. And so our podcast drops on the 1st and the 15th of every month. So feel free to tune in. Marc is always ready, willing, and able to provide those weather updates. So if you need to know what this time of year is looking like, he has got you. So, and as always, if there's any feedback or topics you'd like to see us all dive into, we are more than open to that. Feel free to reach out to our email and let us know. So we will catch everybody on the next episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. If you're on the journey to find guidance and insights, subscribe now wherever you find your podcasts. Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery is an educational resource, not a substitute for medical or therapeutic advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of NAMI DuPage. Go to namidupage.org/podcast for links to past episodes, show notes, and to submit a question or topic ideas for a future episode. Until next time, be well.